Hello and welcome back.
Welcome
to Real Talk Thursday. So today we are going to hopefully not get too serious, but we're going to talk about how do you recover from a major life change? How do you move forward after something unexpected has happened? How do you move on? How do you pivot? How do you go in a different direction when your life takes a turn that you didn't expect? How do you recover from betrayal? How do you recover from the death of a situation, or from the ending of a relationship unexpectedly, or a friendship, or a family relationship, or any of those things? I think we all go through that, especially the older we get, the longer you live, the more things happen, and we always have to keep moving forward. So if this is you, let's talk about it. Keep watching. I would say we both have had several major life changes that ended up almost being like a crossroads for which way we wanted to go when that situation occurred. The most obvious and the easiest for both of us being divorce.
Oh, for sure.
I think anytime you go through a divorce, it's very much obviously like a death.
Absolutely.
It's the grieving of the end of something that you thought was going to last. Because I don't think anyone goes into a situation thinking that it's not going to last. You have that picture in your head of what you think your life is going to look like, and then you find, shoot, this is not what it's going to look like, and I have to make some tough choices.
Right.
So you've been very transparent about your story, and so have I. But talk a little bit more, if you don't mind, about how you actually moved forward after your divorce. What changed in you as a person, and what changed like in your mindset?
I would say that my divorce was probably the biggest turning point in my entire life, honestly. Yeah. Because I think prior to that, I think that a lot of women make marriage an idol in their lives. Mm-hmm. And I think we become almost obsessed with the idea of marriage and what we see on TV and what it's supposed to be like, and how we see other families, because you never really see what's happening behind closed doors. You always see what the front people put on. You don't see the hard stuff. And it becomes like this idol. And for me it definitely was. So like when I got married, like I was nervous. I knew it wasn't going to be like happily ever after. I knew it was going to be hard work and whatever, but for me it was just it was jolting. Because I married someone, and granted we did get married quickly, but I've heard a lot of people get married quickly and it ends up being amazing. It's just you don't ever know when someone is being like truly authentic or not. And in my case, he was like, in his head, I think he was the man that he was pretending to be, but he wasn't actually that man. So for me, like moving forward, I think I was just so in shock. And I think that I was mourning the man that I thought I married, if that makes sense. Like, because like literally, he as soon as I caught him up in his lie, and he was exposed, he became a totally different person. And then granted, we were only married for a total of 6 months, but we were lived together for 4, and so it was fast. So it was terrifying, honestly, for me, because I felt trapped, and like I'm the kind of person that once I see who you really are, like that's it for me. Like I don't need to see anything else. But I'm stuck. I'm married to you. I'm legally tied. I live under the same roof. So it was really hard. But moving forward, after I moved out, it was really, really challenging, but I was also really, really just so grateful. I think for me, it was just the way everything happened. It just showed me how there for me God really was, because if it wasn't for one of my subscribers, you know who you are, I wouldn't have even known. You know what I mean? Like, I think I would have been, I mean, I could feel something was off in my spirit, but I wouldn't have known what to look for. And she got a word from the Lord just randomly, and everything just unfolded and ended up being true. So yeah, it was really, really challenging. So I think on one hand, that's tricky, because on one hand, it was such a huge blessing, and I felt so just grateful. And I think because of how God showed up in that situation, I felt so comforted. Mm-hmm. But then on the emotional aspect, the emotional side of it, I was mortified and devastated. Mm-hmm. Because it's like I really thought that I was gonna have such a great life with him, and it was really, really devastating at the same time. But it was also just a point where, I don't know, I was going through, and it's so funny too, like God just knows what he's doing, because that was the year, every year I pick a word or a phrase for the year, and that year was 2017. I didn't realize he was having an emotional affair, and all the truth ended up coming out in, I think it was February. Mm-hmm. So in January, I posted a video, and the phrase for the year was, it was the year of intentional joy. Mm-hmm. So no matter what,
you had to choose
joy. I had to choose joy. And like, that was the kind of the beginning of that, because I think prior, like, I always struggle with, I wouldn't say I was like negative, but I think, you know how like a lot of negative people are like, I'm not negative, I'm just a realist. Mm-hmm. You know, I had that kind of attitude. But instead, like, that year, I was challenged to choose joy and to like not look at the negative situation that was happening, but try to find the learning lesson from it. Like, what am I supposed to learn here? What like, how can I grow in this experience instead of wallow in like the crappiness of the situation? And it, like, having that perspective, especially like, and then boom, this happens. It literally changed my life. It literally changed my life. So it's kind of, you know, it's interesting, because during that time of my life was a unique time to have gone through that.
Yeah. Was your self-reflection, like, what happened to you as you were trying to move on from the situation in terms of how you saw yourself? Like, did anything change inwardly, you know, of how you decided that you wanted to show up in the world moving forward, or how you wanted to show up in future relationships or anything like that?
Definitely. I think my self-esteem took a hit in one way. I think because my husband wasn't attracted to my body. I was too big for him, which I look back at those videos and I'm like, I was freaking banging. but so that took a hit. But on the other hand, outside of him, I think that's kind of when my perspective on like legalism changed. You know, I honestly felt, it's so weird, because like my emotions were very contradicting. It's like I felt devastated, but I also felt like it was, I described that time of my life like I was trapped in a champagne bottle, but somebody like shook it and then popped it, and I felt free of legalism. Sure. You know what I mean? Because I think like before you think, oh, I would never get divorced, and you got divorced. Why didn't you try to work it out? And God says this, and the Bible says this, and you know, like divorce is a sin, and da 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 da. And I would never get divorced ever. Like, that was my thought. Like, no matter what, divorce is not an option. Well, you know, like sometimes it don't work until you're in a situation and you like that you don't ever expect, then it becomes an option. And I think that like my whole mindset in regards to that, it just made me realize how what I from a lot of like Christians' perspective was sinning by getting divorced, yet God was so in it. So I think for me, that was so liberating. It made me feel like I was no longer bound to like Christian Christian ideas or Christian, like the little box Christians put you in.
Yeah, you mean the ideas of other people, not necessarily the ideas of Christianity itself.
A lot
or both.
Both, I would say, because I think a lot of Christians, not all. I mean, there's a lot of Christians who aren't bound by legalism and legalistic ideas, but I think there are a lot of Christians that are bound by legalistic ideas, and I felt like I was free because I was one of those people. I was one of those people that was bound by legalistic ideas, and for some reason, something about that divorce just set me free. So that was a beautiful thing.
When you got into so don't talk about your next relationship. But in that period between, how did you prepare yourself to be vulnerable again?
Whew, that was tough. I honestly did not ever want to be in a relationship ever again. And I think, like, I had been in a position one time before where I didn't want to be in a relationship, but that was, for a shorter period of time. I think that's like my divorce and like going through that period freed me of like my desire to be in a relationship, really, or my obsession with being in a relationship. It was really, 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 really hard for me to even imagine myself trusting someone ever again. Really, 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 really hard. So, really, the fact that I did open myself up was a miracle. But I think that I was just so focused on just becoming a better version of myself and working on my emotions that I wasn't even thinking about a relationship by that time came at all. Like, all I wanted was to heal. That's it.
Yeah. Was there a point at which you felt ready? Like, was there a day when you woke up and you were like, I think I'm ready now? Or did it sneak up on you?
Well, so I met that guy through a friend. He was like, my friends, they were married at the time, and they were like, oh, this guy will be so great for you. And I was just like, I am not. No,
thank you.
And they were just like, just meet him. Just meet him. We'll go on a double date. And so then I initially going into it, I was just like, no. But we went on the double date, and he was like really nice. And he was definitely very different than, like, he wasn't my type. Which honestly at that point was more comforting to me. And he was just so cool and laid back. And it was kind of one of those things where, like, we met and he was just consistent from the jump. And, like, so I think that he broke my walls down by showing me that he's actually a good guy. But I don't think there was any point where I was just like, yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. You made a really good point that made me think. So going back to what you were saying about being married, you said you think that he believed that he was the person that he thought he
Absolutely.
was. And then, he kind of morphed into this different person. So I know a lot of times when women go through that, one thing that we struggle with is, how did I not see that? Like, how did I not see that? So did you have that fear when you were going forward that someone might be able to trick you again?
Not in the same way, because I don't think that I would never get married that fast again.
How long were you guys together before?
4 months.
Okay, so you were together for 4 months, then you got married.
Yes.
And you were married for 6 months.
And in that circumstance, there were some things that were kind of like, and some things were just things that God was like telling me. That was just like, there was one, I'll give you a specific example. And it's like something that, like, it would sound like I'm just being, everybody that I went to for counsel about these things were just like, you're just being ridiculous. You're trying to find a reason to not like him. Like, stop tripping. But there was one time I went to his house and he had a Bible laid open by his, like, patio door. And immediately I feel like this was God, but it popped in my head that he planted that there to make it look like he was spending time with the Lord there, like to impress me. And I was just like, and I said to him, I was like, what, did you put that there to make it look like you spent time with the Lord this morning? And he was just like, oh no, that's just where I like to lay and, read my Bible and do my devotions and stuff. But then, like, anytime he would be doing his devotions and he would send me a picture of his devotion, it would be at the kitchen table. So then it was like one of those things that, like, it was a red flag to me, but from the outside looking in, people would be like, really? Like, come on. So everything that I saw as a red flag, people would be like, dude, stop tripping. And at that point, I didn't trust my own judgment because of the guy that I thought was my husband, and I was wrong and whatever. So I was going to people for counsel. Well, I would go to Dory and Andrea for counsel all the time. And they're just like, you're just trying to find something wrong with him. But
so was it the issue of the location of where the Bible was, the patio versus the kitchen, or was it you don't think he was really in that Bible at all?
I don't know. I mean, in that moment, I felt like it was strategic. Because who lays on the floor in front of the patio to read their Bible? But, like, maybe somebody does. Like, so it seems ridiculous, but in my spirit, it just felt off to me. I don't know why. And, well, now I do, but, so I don't know that he's never in his Bible, but, like, he's the kind of person that, like, will try to go to the extent to try to make you think he's more holy and godly than he actually is. So if I were to... So there were a lot of little things like that happened. And there were even times where, like, he was very moody. And I would ask, like... I mean, they've since apologized. I'm still close with his dad, mom, and sister. Or stepmom and sister. And I had asked... I was like, is he always like this? Because if he's always like this, I can't do it. And they're like, no. But they weren't lying to be malicious, but they didn't want me to change my mind because they loved me so much that they wanted me to be part of the family, which they have since apologized greatly because like I was noticing who he really was. But they were just like, no, that's not how he always is. He's just stressed out because he was doing a fitness competition at the time or whatever. So if I would have given the relationship more time, then I mean, there's no way that I could not have seen it. Like, people can only pretend so long.
For sure.
So moving forward, I will never be in a relationship for that short of time. Yeah. Like, if I do, it's a miracle. But I just don't see that happening ever again.
So, okay, so now we fast forward. And if you remember... We talked about, and I don't know if we did a video about it or if one of your subscribers brought it up and we were saying it was such a good idea about normalizing relationships not working out at the age that we are. So closer to like being 40 or whatnot. So as you move forward, because, when we go through things in life, sometimes it's not always just one event.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's multiple events. Sometimes it's different, iterations of the same event. Sometimes it's something that stretches out over a long period of time that's like never fully resolved, and it keeps like re-emerging, especially when you have issues with like family members, and which I'll kind of talk about that later for me. But once you were trying to move forward with the best practices that you knew and learning something from each time, how did you stay, and I don't know how committed or motivated you are now because I know how you feel now in terms of relationships, but how did you feel like you were able to keep moving forward and not get to a point where you felt bitter? Because I feel like that is a balance for women, especially when we're trying to find relationships and it's maybe not working. It can almost get to a point to where you feel bitter. And I don't feel like you feel that way. I definitely don't feel that way. But that's like a conscious effort to not feel that way.
I was incredibly bitter after my divorce. I was
bitter period?
Angry. I mean, downright angry. Literally, the F word was like in every other word. Like, I'm just pissed off at the world. I'm just like, F everybody and everything. I mean, it was definitely, like, I went through a period where I genuinely hated him, for sure.
Okay.
And then I just, like, another man don't look at me. Don't even look at me. Don't look at me. I hate you too. Okay? Like, I don't trust nobody. Right.
I hate all y'all.
So, yeah, I definitely went through the bitter phase, but I think, honestly, like, I think the first relationship that I was in after my divorce was a huge blessing. Actually, both of them were. I've only been in two, but, I just think he was placed in my life to show me that not all guys are buttholes, Like, he was just, he wasn't right for me. But he was just a genuinely good person who was, just had a good heart. I mean, and he really, like, cared about me. And he was just thoughtful and sweet. I mean, he was, like, I'd never dated anybody who, like, I went to, like, right after I got back from Switzerland was when we kind of broke up for whatever, I'm not going into that. But he, like, when I went to Switzerland, he, like, parked the car and walked me in and walked me to the terminal. I'm like, I've never had a guy do that. He, like, one time I had to go to Fort Wayne to go visit one of my friends to help her with something, and he drove me all the way to Fort Wayne to drop me off, and he picked me up. I'm like, who does that? Like, so just little, I feel like that was God kind of showing me, like, okay, Shanna, like, I know you've been angry, but let me just show you that there are good guys out here. Yeah. And so that kind of, like, that really was healing for me, honestly.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with that. I feel like I had a similar experience.
With Bubby's dad?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Share your marriage.
Share my story.
Divorce.
So,
emotions.
Our stories are probably a lot different in the fact that I was still really young. When I got married, I was 21, and we were married for 5 years, and I was 26 when we got divorced. And here's what I will say. It's such a weird thing to explain. I feel like what I learned the most was about myself. Yeah. And one of the reasons why, like, now that I have kids, and especially, because my daughters are older, why I would counsel my daughters to not get married when you're young.
Those are pivotal years.
Yeah, and you're learning so much about yourself. You're learning so much about how to accurately read other people. For sure. Because it's a lot easier to be fooled or whatever when you're young, because you don't really have a lot of life experience to draw on to be like, oh, no, hold on, I know this, or, something. It's like you don't really know what feels right or wrong. Yeah. I will say the thing that was very hard for me when you're married, and, as a Christian, it's like, okay, the husband is supposed to be in a place of honor, whatever, in a certain way. But your husband is not supposed to be in God's place.
Absolutely.
So, I had put my husband on a pedestal that he shouldn't have been on. And I don't think I did it intentionally. Right. I just kind of did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. It was more so like a mental thing. So when we got divorced and things got really ugly there for a period, it really affected my relationship with God, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because I elevated him in my mind a little higher than he should be, for sure. And it actually took me some years to undo that thinking. And I don't even know if it, because he was like in a position in church or whatever. I don't think that it was that necessarily, more so than it was. I told you, I just recently did my first podcast. Be on the lookout for that. A friend invited me to do a podcast. But one thing I was telling her when she was asking me like a good piece of advice for teenagers, and this kind of ties into what I'm getting ready to say. It's teaching teens and young women and young men how to identify when people have a relationship with God, right? So I didn't have anyone to necessarily teach me about that. So when I got with my now ex-husband, he and his family were in church. So, and my family was not really necessarily in church. So you think as a young person, not knowing any better, these people are in church.
They're godly, right?
They're godly.
Absolutely.
They probably live their life in a certain way because they believe certain things. So you think that you're going to have a certain caliber or a certain type of person. And when you don't learn how to really, in a practical way, identify the fruit of the Spirit in somebody's life, then you don't have anything to go off of other than like their church attendance.
Which I feel like a lot of Christians still have that mentality.
For sure. And I don't think it has anything to do with anything other than people just not having sound practical teaching. I think a lot of times some churches, I do think it's getting better, but some churches for a long time have been very guilty of not showing people how to live and not showing people, telling people you got to believe in God and you got to follow God, but not showing people what does that look like?
Right.
What do you mean when you say that? So what ended up happening was I didn't have a frame of reference for identifying when people's lives are really submitted to God. So I put him and his family and the whole situation. I almost for a while felt like they were better than my family because my family wasn't in church and stuff like that at the time.
Not you, Bubby.
Yeah. And to be quite honest, they reinforced that belief. And because, when I, just being in a part of their family and, when you get in to know people and you're vulnerable and you tell them things about your life and about your family and things like that, they almost in a way, kind of made it seem like, well, now you're with us now. Type of,
like you're safe now.
Type of a thing, enemy, right? Yeah. From the right.
Oh my God.
And the thing that's so interesting, I just really had this thought the other day, and hindsight is 20/20. For me to have been a young person and to have and I almost can't necessarily even fault my ex-husband because he was young at the time too when we were learning, but to have been in a situation with, maybe his parents or other older people who would have known at the time, I'm a young person who has been vulnerable with you about things about her family that she has no control over. And then when we divorced, when I tell you they tried to use that stuff against me, it was like literal wolves in sheep's clothing. And I felt like it was so interesting because that says more about their character.
For sure.
But for, the longest time still, because the situation was so difficult to navigate, I just kind of like had a feeling of shame or guilt in a lot of ways. Again, for things, that were outside of my control that I was a victim of myself. And now, instead of you being a Christian person who could wrap your arms around another person that you know has gone through a difficulty or has a difficult situation, you use their pain against them to try to elevate yourself.
For sure.
And so just being a young person going through that situation, again, like I said, was really, really difficult. And God had to work in my heart to get me to understand, for one, God doesn't put all of us are filthy rags.
I mean, that's real.
Like, God doesn't put any of us on a pedestal.
No, he does not.
We're all on a even level playing field. And even though my family has difficulties, God really had to show me, he placed me in the family that I'm in for a reason.
Yeah.
The family that I'm in is what made me who I am. And we definitely had a lot of difficulties, and we still have a lot of difficulties. But there's a reason, or, there can still be goodness that comes out of any type of difficult situation. So just to move on from, because I think what ended up happening was, like I said, it kind of warped my relationship with God for a little bit, because I had elevated them up so high. So I had to ask God, like, give me a right view,
right,
first and foremost, of myself, because I had put myself down low to the ground,
Because at that point, would you say, I mean, obviously you're very intentional about self-development also, so you've changed a lot.
Yeah.
Were you, because you're really, really strong now, like mentally, and just, would you say you were strong then mentally, or?
I think I was, and let me say it like this. To have gone through some of the things I've gone through in my life since childhood, there is a strength that God has put inside me that has always been there.
Okay.
Now, I didn't always know it was there, and I didn't always know how to access it.
For sure. That makes sense.
So at that point, as a matter of fact, I started to feel, just as a, result of growing up and maturing and trying to get closer to God, I started to feel myself changing, which was a part of the reason I decided to end my marriage. I felt like a bird in a glass cage. And there was like an element of faking the funk that existed in that whole situation, that the more I was in it, it just, it was like, I could do it at first, but then, it gets to the point where you're like, I cannot do this anymore. Right. So, we had dated for about 3 years, and we were married for about 5 years. And towards the end, I was just so disgusted of trying to put on a show.
For sure.
For people at church, or for anybody. It's like, I didn't care. I didn't want to live a life that wasn't authentic. And I remember knowing that I was going to leave, like, before I actually said the words and did the actions. And I remember it, I had a pep talk with myself in the bathroom. My oldest daughter was almost 3 years old, and Mariah, my younger daughter, was 7 months old.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember giving myself a pep talk. And it was almost like I was telling myself, this is going to be hard, but you can do, you can do this. And I just remember I just kept saying over and over and over, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. You know how you kind of just it's like, don't do that, because you're going to make me cry.
That's intense.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where I was like, nope, it's going to be okay. Because like I said, I had already been through just a lot during my childhood. So I was no stranger to difficult times. And so I was like, no, you can do this. And I felt the same way as you, like a freedom. And not even necessarily just from what I felt like was a toxic situation. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't getting beat or anything like that. But, and I'll say this, look, this is my truth. Nobody else has to agree. I feel like when you're in an unhealthy or potentially toxic situation, there are lots of little things that start and build up to bigger things.
Yeah.
I made the choice to not give it an opportunity to build up to bigger things.
But also, people dismiss mental abuse. Just because you don't get bruises doesn't mean that you're not mentally getting abused, and that can sometimes be worse.
And I feel like there was obviously we were young, so there was a lot of immaturity there. I feel like, and I try to choose my words carefully because I have children with this person, but everybody has certain ways that they deal and adapt and move through life based on how they were raised.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was an element to his personality based on how he was raised where he was very good at bending things to his will. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, one thing that has been true about me from the beginning of time and will be true for me until the end of time, I'm not bending to nobody's will. Right. And there was just something in me that was not, I just couldn't do it. You know what I mean? I just couldn't do it. And I felt, and I tried to do it willingly. Mm-hmm. I tried to do it, but it just wasn't true to who I was as a person. So honestly, to his credit, I feel like I was living a lie, also trying to conform to something that I knew wasn't me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a part of that glass birdhouse prison metaphor was self-inflicted, right? Because then I was trying to fit myself into what I felt like was that image that they had built.
Because it was attractive.
And it was shiny.
And you're young.
But it was false. Right. It was just false. There's no other way to describe it. So in any event, the way that I moved forward from that was I had to really, and I mean years and years and years of the same consistent prayer. God, please help me to see myself the way you see me. Mm-hmm. What is the value, the strength, the beauty, the confidence, whatever it is that you see when you look at me, help me to see that in myself. Because my mother had, thank you, Bubby. My mother has stayed in an unhealthy situation. And as a child, I watched it change who she was as a person. Mm-hmm. And I always told myself I would not ever let that happen to me. So when I felt it start to happen, that's when I was just like, oh no, like I know where this road leads. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be an empty shell of a person. So over the years, like God he answered my prayer.
So when do you feel like you started noticing the mental shift in you that he was answering that prayer?
I think it was probably, my process is be moving slow, y'all. So probably around year 3 after my divorce, around that 3rd year and then moving forward, that was when I really started to notice like the ball rolling and picking up speed and moving in a direction, because I honestly have been asking God, like, if I need to do something to help this be better, even if it's something hard, like, just give me the strength, like, just help me do it. So I even still remember, you know how they say forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for yourself. Yeah. I remember clearly God telling me to call my ex and apologize. I think I've told this story before. And I remember being very resistant to the idea because I'm like, what do I have to apologize for? But I just remember God making it very clear that I needed to do that because it was going to lead me to freedom. And it was going to allow me to fully let that whole situation go and any resentment, any whatever that I had, it was going to help me let that go. And I remember doing it, feeling like I was going to vomit.
I can't even imagine.
Because it was such a, such an unsavory thing to do.
I can't imagine if God asked me to apologize to my ex-husband.
Oh my God.
My apology would be like, I'm sorry that I believed your sorry tale.
But, I had to, for that moment, I had to put my own thoughts and pride and everything. I had to, and it's hard to fight your human nature. For sure. Like, I had to shove it down because I really trusted if God is telling me to do this, there has to be a big reason why he's telling me to do it. And I remember I did it. And I remember calling and I was like, don't you answer that daggone phone. You better let it go to voicemail.
And then he answered on the first ring.
I'm like, we don't even talk. You know what I mean? So I'm fully expecting for him to, like, first of all, be like, why, is she calling? And that's exactly what happened. From that day forward, the healing process, like, even accelerated. And that helped me to really learn to trust that what God was asking me to do was right and was the right thing for me. And there's been other instances in my life where that has happened, where God has told me to do something that I felt like didn't make sense. And I've been able, because of that, to trust him in those other situations too. And that has helped me to continue moving forward. So there's that on that. But I want to talk about something a little bit different too. You have been transparent about how this pandemic has affected you, especially as a businesswoman. It has really upended your life.
It really has.